Are you like me and just waiting for cancel culture to die? That's what we're unpacking today on Black Ram TV's podcast, Gaining Ground. My name is Daniela Sigia, and I am Chief Strategist and Creative Director at Black Ram Media Group. And today we're going to talk about what created cancel culture and how we pick it apart and tear it down. So first we're going to look at algorithms. This is how all this mess started. First, we look at the algorithms of social media that undermine you if you create content that does not get engagement. So everything has to have likes and shares and comments, or Facebook or whatever other social media account will make sure that you fall lower on the algorithm scale, which means less and less people will see you. Now, this had an unintended, very negative impact on legacy news outlets that, used to create very balanced articles and present both sides of the argument, which kept people very logical and rational. The problem is that when people are feeling logical about something or they see both sides of an argument, they don't get upset. And the way human nature is they tend to only engage with a post if they either really love it, like it gets them excited, or it gets them very angry. And it's a lot easier to get the public riled up than it is to get them excited. So unfortunately, legacy news outlets started dropping in relevance on social media platforms, and independent news agencies that were being hyper partisan, very salacious, they were the ones getting all the ticks. That forced reporters to be put under pressure to start writing articles that would get more engagement from the public, and therefore they had to behave like they were tabloid artists. And that's when we started seeing a lot of clickbait headlines, partisan reporting, or just, misreporting. So a lot of facts were missed or fudged, and it was just awful. And that's where we started to hear all about fake news. And now our biggest legacy media companies, we've lost trust in completely because of how they behave. And unfortunately, we created that monster when we started, giving engagement to salacious reporting as opposed to a proper reporter. So they all got pushed out, and tabloid writers, ended up becoming our news people. And that has undermined the trust that we have in legacy news. Now, what started happening there is that when these reporters started writing their articles that were to get people angry, they started sacrificing people at the altar. So if, for example, a public figure of any kind made a mistake, they would present that mistake in a really inflated way, and that would cause public uproar. And with that public uproar, depending on how big it got, and people became very organized at, sending multiple messages to a head office or on social media, or boycotts started to get, really popular, that then what happened was lazy PR people started giving bad advice. So now we're going to shift the blame to lazy PR people. So what would happen is they would pick a public figure and they would hang him out to dry, and companies' leaders would go to PR people and say, what do we do? And they always gave the same formulaic answer. We issue an apology, fire a staffer. And the public then got used to getting a pound of flesh every time they got angry. So the problem is more and more articles are coming out, trashing more and more people, trashing industries, trashing everything, all to get everybody mad, you sometimes for nothing, and these poor people's lives would be ruined. And that became the thing. And now what happens is big companies, political parties, whatever, they stick to the method of apologize, throw a staffer under the bus. And then it got to the point that staffers weren't enough, and now actual business leaders, politicians, whatever, will get thrown under the bus. And the companies don't stick behind them because they're told to run and hide. The other thing the lazy PR people do is they tell everybody to apologize even when they're not wrong. So, sometimes the public gets it wrong or the press got it wrong. And instead of saying, no, that news article was false, instead, oh, I'm so sorry, or don't respond at all, and you just hope it goes away. And there used to be a saying in the PR world, it's just a 3-day news cycle. It's just a 3 day, in 3 days, everybody's going to forget about it. And although that is true, because I've seen this happen time and again, what happens is those negative articles about you are indexed on Google. So even though no new articles are coming out against you, anytime somebody Googles you 3, 5, 10 years from now, those articles are still going to come up and they will haunt you forever. So cancel culture mob, began over this, moral outrage that everybody feels is, a popular thing to do right now. And that's because, like I said, social media platforms have created that consciousness in people, and they've become addicted to the pound of flesh, and they validate themselves by how many lives they can ruin whenever they're out to chase somebody. But do you notice that with some celebrities, they're cancel proof? Do you notice that? Some celebrities actually monetize the vitriol spewed at them. So I'll give you an example, like Bill Burr or Dave Chappelle, right? People try to cancel them all the time. Jordan Peterson's another one. People want to cancel him too, and they just refuse to go away. And as a result, they're growing, becomes bigger and bigger, and now they even create content around the fact that people want to cancel them. So they've even taken it a step further where they've monetized the cancel culture mob. So they're profiting from them. They're profiting from that vitriol. So you can turn it around too. I remember my first gig in PR was in the entertainment industry, and I was hired as a support person. I didn't have a leadership role in this at all, just a little support role. But it was with one of the best disaster PR agents on the planet. To know, I was maybe in my mid-20s. I'm now almost 50. In my mid-20s, this guy was charging a $100,000 retainer, and for him to actually dive in and pull his strings to fix the thing was $350,000. And it was an absolute privilege to be in the same room with that man, because I learned so much from him on all the different ways that you can respond to bad press without admitting guilt and without apologizing. And if you were innocent, he would insist that you not apologize, and he would help you fight back. And that's why he was able to charge the amount of money he does. And I learned that apologizing is not always the way to go. But I was young and naive, so I left that little contract and came back and worked a regular job, and as life would have it, years later, ended up back in PR. But although I remembered those lessons, I was still very insecure. And I was receiving training from other media people that were all saying, you always have to be cheerful. You always have to be positive. You can never start arguing with the press. Don't tangle with them because you'll lose. They're bigger than you. So never fight the press. When they write bad things about you, just apologize, make a donation somewhere, or fire somebody. And they would give me the same advice. And as it would happen, the company I worked for was getting a ton of bad press. But I noticed this little pattern would happen. Every time a municipality wanted to impose regulations that normally would be protested, something would appear in the paper that was usually not always correct. It was very one-sided or very lopsided opinions, and everybody would get in an uproar, and then they would use the uproar as the excuse as to why they were doing regulations. They say, due to public demand, public outrage, we are now going to do this to regulate the industry. And a little bit at a time, that industry got destroyed. Now, while that was happening, there was this big PR attack on the small family businesses in this industry. And they were attacked by paid trolls online as well as in the press. And I became a victim of that bandwagon. And they not only attacked the business I worked for, they started to attack me personally as the representative of this business. And I had been taking bad advice all these years, telling me not to fight back, to just be nice and ignore it. So a little bit at a time, I was seen as the villain of the industry, and the press made me that way. And there was nothing I could do. And I started reaching out to other PR firms for help. And none of them would touch me because I was getting bad PR, which you would think if you own a PR firm, isn't that the whole point of your existence? But I guess not. And I finally found one, Tracy Lamerie, and she heard what happened to me and said, this is disgusting and you need to tell your side of the story. So she had me on morning talk shows and some radio programs where I could give my account of what was happening in the industry. And then what ended up happening was I was able to monetize all that vitriol because suddenly, because the press was talking about me so much, I must have been important. So then people wanted to listen to what I had to say. And because I wasn't apologizing anymore and I was actually educating, now I had an audience of listener, and a big cohort of that listener said, you know what Daniela says is making sense. Maybe the press got it wrong. And then universities started to invite me to guest lecture. And then I ended up appearing at summits where I was public speaking, talking about this thing and all sorts of stuff. So suddenly they turned me into a public figure. I took all that audience and I captured that audience. And it served me very, very well. And that happened as soon as I stopped taking all the advice to run and hide. I had to get mad enough to actually start fighting back. And with the help of Tracy Lamry, she's a great publicist in Hamilton, I was able to do that. I did it so well that then other people would approach me asking for help with their PR. And over time that evolved to include political strategizing, and I grew the business that way and ended up growing this consulting side of Black Ram Media Group. Now, I also remember one time I had a reporter from a major news outlet that I did not like. And every article she wrote, she was part of the article bandwagon that was hurting me. And she asked me for a quote. So I told her that I refused to speak with her because I found her corrupt, but I was happy if she published that. I told her she was allowed to use that as a quote. She didn't. And then I went online and said, this reporter wants to talk to me about this issue, and I think she's scum, so I won't talk to her, but I'll talk to any competing reporter from a competing outlet. And I started playing those games. And when I started to fight back against the media, do you know what happened? Like any other bully in a schoolyard, they left me alone. As soon as I started fighting back and picking apart the lies in their articles, I would do entire dissertations. I would have an article and I'd highlight all the bullshit parts, and I would do a 20-minute video explaining all the ways that article was full of shit. And as soon as I started doing that, they all left me alone. So you have to remember that even though the 3-day news cycle and everybody will forget and they won't be in your face all the time, you will be Googled and all the negativity will come up. So it's not enough to wait for the blowback to blow over. You need to correct the narrative. You need to set the stage and tell the story of who you are and what you are to undo the lies that cancel culture mobs will project towards you. And know that no matter how bad the PR is, that could be a captive audience. We're just waiting for you to win them over. So you can weaponize it and monetize it. And then really, so not only will the cancel culture mob not hurt you, you can turn them into a moneymaker for you. You can turn them into an audience. But even if you're not willing to go that far, what you do have to do is not allow yourself to get canceled. You need to be like Dave Chappelle or Bill Burr, right? That finds a way to monetize these people. At least they have some use. They're keyboard worrying. This moral outrage is exhausting and it's toxic. And we've lost decorum. I could say in politics, many times a politician is told to not look at their social media pages because the amount of abuse, and I'm not just talking about I disagree with your policy or I don't trust you and I don't like you. I'm talking about veiled accusations and threats, the amount of aggression and violence in the words that people spew to politicians is absolutely shameful. Shameful how much decorum we have lost as a species thanks to social media, because they would never say this stuff in person to somebody. But behind a screen, everybody gets brave. And they don't care if they ruin your life. That's what they want. They want to remove the dignity of you earning a living. And that's their ultimate goal. And that will only happen if you let them. So by saying nothing and looking down and ignoring and apologizing for stuff you didn't do, all of that feeds the beast, and it will never be enough. So when we start seeing brands push back, when we start seeing brands defend their leaders that are being hung out to dry, or political parties standing by their politicians instead of dumping them at the first sight of a scandal, until that happens, you keep feeding the beast and it's going to keep getting bigger. When you allow a bully to be a bully, he will bully. But as soon as you push back, they will back down. And that's the same with the cancel culture mob. You can be immune to it. And one great way to do that is to partner with an amazing PR person, if you can find one, willing to fight the mob. Black Ram Media Group, we fight the mob. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining in today. You've been listening to Black Ram TV's podcast, Gaining Ground. My name is Daniela Sagia. Go get 'em.